Welcome back, my friends, to the Derate the Hate podcast. I am your host, Wilk Wilkinson, your blue-collar sage, calming outrage and helping to navigate a world divided by fog and those who would spread that fear, outrage, and grievance. Each week, I'm sharing stories from my path and using the power of conversation and collaboration with my many great guests. Together, we chart a course toward understanding, bridging divides, and fostering a community where wisdom prevails over discord. Friends, it really is about bettering the world one attitude at a time. We did not create the hate, but together we can derate the hate. The only good thing about a bad attitude is we have the ability as individuals to change it. For me, it starts with gratitude and personal accountability. I am so incredibly grateful that you have taken the time to join me for another powerful DTH episode. Please remember to subscribe and share the DTH podcast with your network of friends. If you would like to support the show, check out the Support Us page on the Derate the Hate website. With that, my friends, let's get to it. Joining me today is Dr. Georg Yancey, a distinguished sociologist, professor at Baylor University, and the author of Beyond Racial Division. Georg is also another of our esteemed members of the ProHuman Foundation Board of Advisors. Dr. Yancey's work is both refreshing and deeply needed. While so much of the current conversation around race is polarized, whether it's the call for colorblindness or the push for anti-racism, he critiques these approaches for their shortcomings. Instead, he advocates for something radically different: mutual accountability, genuine dialogue, and active listening. His Christian-based model for race relations offers practical steps to foster understanding and unity while humanizing rather than stigmatizing individuals. In Beyond Racial Division, Dr. Yancey challenges us to confront the complexities of race without falling into the traps of identity politics or reinforcing division. He emphasizes that finding common ground is valuable, but it's not always necessary for meaningful connection. It's about creating better conversations, not just louder ones. Dr. Yancey's work aligns closely with the mission of organizations like the ProHuman Foundation, which is committed to promoting unity and a pro-human message. As someone deeply invested in bringing people together, I cannot wait to unpack his insights and explore how we can all play a role in bridging divides. So let's get to it. Here we go. Georg Yancey, thank you so much for joining me on the Derate the Hate podcast. I have been looking forward to this conversation. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, Georg. So this is another conversation I am having with members of the ProHuman Foundation Board of Advisors. And Georg, when I saw the work that you've been doing as an author, as a professor, lecturer in the depolarization space, unity space, how do we bridge divide space, I knew that we were going to have a fantastic conversation. So I really do appreciate you joining me here today. And Georg, one of the first things that stood out to me about your work is the book Beyond Racial Division. As somebody who has been doing a lot of work in recent years in the way of polarization and depolarization, bridging divides, and then I started looking at your book Beyond Racial Division, a unifying alternative to colorblindness and anti-racism. I couldn't wait to have this conversation. So let's start there. What inspired you to write this book Beyond Racial Division?
Well, it's kind of funny because I've written on racial issues in the past, and then I stopped like about, 20 years ago. And I was interested in studying other things. And then in 2020, with Albury and Floyd and all that coming about, I thought, man, maybe I need to get back in it. But I really didn't want to. My wife kind of convinced me to. She said I should, and I kept telling her I don't want to because I know it's a lot of work and you make a lot of enemies that you don't have to make and that sort of stuff. But really felt called to get back into it. And so I decided to upgrade some of my previous arguments and really take a look at things and pull together the beyond racial division. And one of the things that people had said about my earlier work is that, it was insightful, but it didn't really help you tell people what to do. How do we approach it? And so I tried to be a little bit more practical in this one. Here, here's some steps we could take. Here's some ways we could look at this. And hopefully, and I also decided to really try to get involved in the practical end of it, not just the academic end of things. And so I'm trying to do research that would better situate us so that we can improve our dialogues on racial issues. And it also doesn't, I'll put it this way. I'm focused on racial issues, but the things I'm talking about obviously go beyond racial issues. I mean, we just had a presidential election. Our country is about as polarized as you could get, short of a civil war. One side hates the other and the other side hates them back. I just feel that, that some of the things I've talked about, that they're applicable to what we would call a blue-red divide that we have in our society. Yeah. I don't know. Why am I thinking about orange? I don't know where that came from. I guess maybe I'm a Texas Longhorn fan. I don't know. But anyways, I just think that we just need a different attitude to how we treat each other.
Absolutely. And that's one of these things about, polarization and division, whether that divide, George, is, a black-white divide, a red-blue divide, as we would talk about in the circles of braver angels, of which I do a lot of work with as well, or whether it's the rural-urban divide or the class divide. A lot of these things have very common tenets to them. And so a lot of the practices that are used when it comes to depolarization and promoting unifying, or, promoting unity, trying to unify, different sides of issues. But one of the things that I want to talk about when it comes to your book, because I've had several conversations with it, whether it be, with our friend Daryl Davis or, our common, colleague at the ProHuman Foundation, Dr. Tavia Lee, or people like Dr. Sheena Mason, who talks about the theory of racelessness, or now her, the Wayfinder, the Togetherness Wayfinder, for whatever reason I was drawing a blank there, and then reading books like Stamped by Ibram X. Kendi. One of the things that stood out to me about your book, George, that I really want to kind of dive into is you kind of break it down into three things and the shortcomings of a couple of them. The idea of colorblindness that obviously falls short and it ignores certain things. The idea of anti-racism and how anti-racism in itself has a lot of things associated with that promote division, in my opinion, and that's been my experience. And then you talk about mutual accountability. So for me, I talk a lot about personal accountability. I love the idea of mutual accountability. So let's kind of work through these things step by step, and from your perspective, George, let's first start talking about colorblindness, because I think that's a good place to start, because I think a lot of people and from my experience, in a lot of my early interactions trying to work my way through some of these things, I was always like, you know what? Colorblindness. I want a colorblind society. I don't want anybody to see anything having to do with, the melanin in our skin. It is what it is. Let's just move forward. But it does ignore some things. So let's start there.
Yeah. So, I mean, I understand the draw of colorblindness. I mean, it's, simple. It's simple. We just all treat each other equally. We ignore our race. But the problem is that it's ignoring something that is still there and still impacts us. And the research is pretty clear that our race still matters. And I gave a couple of examples in the book. One of the famous examples is what they call an audit test. We have a black man and a white man apply for a job, or a white man and a Hispanic man apply for a job. and the white person is more likely to be called back for an interview. We don't know if they're going to get the job or not, but that's the next step. And so if blacks and Hispanics are taking that next step, they're less likely to get the job. Driving around black, there's prejudice in the criminal justice system. I mean, these are not things that, and I can go into the studies that people really want me to, but this isn't just that I feel discrimination. These are actual studies that show that we treat people differently by race. Now, it's not nearly what it was. I'm not talking about, hey, we're back in Jim Crow. I'm not going to hyperbole. I don't have to. As an African American, these studies inform me of my own experiences, where when I was younger, car doors used to lock whenever I just walked by them. I remember asking my white male friends, did that ever happen to you? And they said, no, never happened to us. Things like that. And so we know that's there. And so when you're asking someone to say, can we be colorblind now? And all this is still happening, the person's going to say no, because we got to resolve what's happening right now. And we got to resolve the historical deficiencies that have impacted all of us. There's a reason why whites make more money than African Americans and things of this nature. So, colorblindness does not work, even though it sounds great. Anti-racism doesn't work either. The attitude of anti-racism, I mean, it corrects some of the problems of colorblindness in that we look for this racism when we find it. But it's become toxic in the way that it's been applied. I had a friend just point a study to me. There's a lot of studies, many I cite in the book. I just found out about another one that I'm trying to confirm. So I'm going to tell you what I know about this study, because I think it's very, very meaningful.
Okay.
Once I can confirm it. And if I can't confirm it, then I'll shoot you an email that says, oh, this turned out to be bogus. You can cut this part out. But it seems that when you teach anti-racism, teaching the people like D'Angelo and Kendi, when you teach this, what it does is it conditions people to look for racism, even when it doesn't exist. So what happens is, you do anti-racism programs, and there's other problems with anti-racism programs. I outline in my books. It creates a backlash. It does not reduce prejudice. There's a lot of other problems. But that's really shocking to me, and I really want to read that study to digest that, because what it means is that these programs actually create their own demand.
Yes.
This is racism. We do an anti-racism program. People look for racism even where it doesn't exist, so now there's more of a demand for anti-racism program. You can see how it can become a vicious circle.
Yes.
And I fear that I want to find a study because it feels right to me. I've noticed that places that engage in heavy anti-racism, they never stop fighting racism.
Yep.
And a person can say, well, it was always there, but I just, why is it you find more in places that do anti-racism than don't? Right. And I think that this is part of the problem. So there's a lot of other problems with anti-racism programs. They don't fix what they purport to fix. And in fact, I fear they make things worse.
Yeah. And I want to dive into that a little bit more, because this is something that I've had this conversation with so many people, George, and this is one of, I guess this is only one, facet to that. But one of the things that I've always seen as being a real problem with anti-racism and the work of people like D'Angelo and Kendi, which I think have many problems to them. I also think that you can't fight hate with hate. You can't battle racism by using racism as a tool. I think there's a number of different things there, but the thing that really catches me in what you're saying, and what I think this study is kind of proving in some way, if in fact the data supports it, and I have no doubt that it probably does. It's because this thing, if we're teaching racism and we're showing people that yes, you are a victim, and you're always going to be a victim, and you're going to have to work twice as hard to have half as much, and things like this. Those things, then stand out in a person's mind. And us as human beings, we have this reticular activating system. We can only focus on so many things. We can only see so many things. And when we're constantly focused and pushed towards this idea that we are going to be victimized, we are going to be oppressed in a way, we're always those things are going to be readily available wherever we're looking. They are going to stand out to us more than opportunity. And I think that's one of those things that is so unfortunate there's no doubt that ignoring problems is not the answer, but also doing nothing but and constantly pointing out and constantly putting at the forefront of somebody's brain that you're a victim, you're oppressed, you're going to find those things. They are going to be more readily available. We are going to seek out that which will confirm our own mindset. It's part of human nature, and I think it's an ugly thing. So tell me what your thoughts are about that.
Yeah, I fear that you're correct. I've been doing some research looking into identity politics lately, which I think feeds into a lot of this. And, I did have a paper come out last year that shows that identity politics is a big predictor of lower levels of well-being. In fact, what we know, what's been well established, is that progressives have lower levels of well-being than conservatives. And what my paper shows is that it appears that this difference almost entirely is captured by their higher propensity towards identity politics. Now, the bad news is conservatives are now beginning to also adopt identity politics.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the conservatives are about to catch up with the progressives in lower levels of well-being. The implications of that are enormous when you think about it, because what it means is that focusing in on this sort of identity politics, although I can't really say that identity politics creates the lower levels of well-being, it may be that people who already have lower levels of well-being go into identity politics. But if it does create it, then by engaging in this sort of anti-racism, which is a type of identity politics, or other types of isms, and engaging in it, we're actually making people sicker.
Yes.
And making people sicker, then they're less able to have resilience. They're more likely to create dysfunctional situations in our society. So we are actually reinforcing our problems with our attempted solutions. We may understand why people want those solutions, because once again, race still matters, mostly negatively for people of color.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But then we're making things worse. So I think that is just something that I've thought about, is how we have a way of doing politics and activism that makes people less well, or at least reinforces the fact that they're less well. And then these people go on to have big voices in our society. And so we're kind of led by people who have lower levels of well-being. And if you've been in a situation where someone above you had, a low level of well-being, they're depressed, or they're anxious, or they're whatever, controlling, manipulative, then you know that that's not the best situation. So we got to find ways out of this that strengthen us rather than weaken us. And I fear that right now we've latched on to solutions that weaken us.
I think you're absolutely right. I think a lot of times, especially when it comes to our politics, that the solution ends up being worse than the problem itself. And a lot of times you just have politics, and this is why I often say those who represent us are far too often not the best of us, because they spend a lot of their time pretending to try and fix problems that they themselves created, or that they themselves are exacerbating. But as far as people, as far as us as citizens, George, I want to get into this thing that you talk about in the book, mutual accountability. What does mutual accountability mean to you? Because, like I said, I talk a lot about personal accountability, and I think personal accountability is one of the greatest things, whether it be, personal responsibility, personal accountability. I think it's one of the greatest tools that we have as human beings, as individuals, that individual responsibility, individual accountability. What does mutual accountability mean, and how can we use that to, I guess, overcome the the shortcomings and the bad things that we see with, colorblindness and anti-racism and really use that for a force to unify and move beyond this racial division.
Yeah. So, the pathway that I see we need to take is to learn how to have better conversations with one another. Mm-hmm. In other words, rather than stigmatizing each other, rather than, rejecting the other, we got to humanize each other. And that doesn't mean we have to agree. I'm not saying we have to agree with where people are coming. I'm just saying we have to have better conversations. All right. But to have those conversations, it means that we have to have some sort of ground rules, right? Mm-hmm. So if we have a conversation where someone's just yelling and doesn't let a person get the word in edgewise, I had an unpleasant experience not too long ago when someone was trying to do that to me. So I just cut off the conversation. What can I do? That conversation is null and void. And I'm not going to be willing to learn from this person.
Right.
So what we have to have is conversations we can be open, we can put our ideas out there and find the best solutions. Mm-hmm. The mutual part becomes that if to have these conversations, everyone has certain responsibilities. No one can shirk them. So there's no more, whites just sit down and listen and just hear us. You have responsibilities, we don't. That doesn't work. Nope. All right?
Nope.
We have responsibilities, all of us, responsibilities to learn how to listen to one another, learn how to articulate, communicate in a way people can hear us, to learn how to be willing to work with people, to try to work towards compromise. And once again, I'm not presupposing what the compromise should be. I'm not saying you must compromise this. There may be things that you can't compromise, but if you say I can never compromise at all, then you're basically saying it has to be my way or the highway.
Right.
Working towards finding a solution. That's the mutual part. Now, the actual solution may not be mutual. We've had centuries of racial abuse. The solutions we come with are probably not going to always be everything's going to be exactly equal. There may be some need of justice in that way. But how we get there is critical. If we get there by overpowering people and say, we will demand justice from you, and you will give it to us whether we like it or not, and we use power in that way, then we must keep using power to keep them in line. And just think about the damage that's been done in our society by people who feel like they have to keep power, do whatever they can to keep power, where losing is not an option.
Oh, yeah.
On the other hand, if we get there by working together, collaborating, drawing them in, finding some compromise where they can have buy-in, where they feel that they're getting something in this process. And now we're working together instead of who's the strongest, biggest, baddest person to hold people down. That's a totally different. The solution, once again, may be, whites need to do this, and people of color, don't have as much demand on them. But this is something that has been agreed upon, worked together upon, rather than imposed upon. I think until we get to that point, until we try and find solutions we're not imposing on others, we're going to keep having the problems we have, and they're not going to go away. So that's what I mean by mutual accountability.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I think you keyed on a lot of very important things there, and one of the biggest things that I promote here on this show and through my work with Braver Angels and as an advisor with the ProHuman Foundation is the importance of a conversation, right? I mean, you talk about imposing your will or this bad conversation that you had recently, and I'm sure that's not the only one. I know I've had plenty in my life where somebody is just like, I'm going to yell as loud as I can to make you listen to me. But, when somebody, George, is just basically telling you that I am going to tell you this no matter what you think, no matter what my ears slam shut instantly, right? I'm like, if you have no interest in how I think about what you're saying or whether I'm actually receiving what you're saying. And certainly if you have no interest in listening to what I have to say based on what you have just told me, I'm going to be much less inclined to listen. It's just, that's one of the biggest things that I had to learn, as I went through my own personal journey away from toxicity and trying to become a better person is the best thing that I can do is listen. And I know for some people it sounds cliche, but I always go back to the old Stephen Covey saying from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, seek first to understand, then to be understood. Listen with the intent to understand what the other person is saying, and then be able to, as my friend Angel Eduardo talks about when he talks about star manning, be able to reiterate, be able to say back to that person what they have just said in a way that they would understand it, right? That way they know. That way they know that you've actually received the message that they're trying to convey, and they are going to be much more inclined to listen to what you have to say. That conversation has to be a two-way street. That mutual accountability is so important. And you're right. I mean, there is no, I guess, equal footing on the amount. I don't care. Like I said, I don't care what divide you're trying to bridge, George. It's, whether it's the rural and urban divide or the class divide, those who have and those who don't have, and things like that. There's always going to be an unequal footing and an unequal amount of, for lack of a better word, reparations to get beyond, whatever it is you're trying to get beyond, right? There's always going to be an imbalance. But the important part and the starting point for all of that has to be that conversation. We have to be able to talk to people or talk to each other, and you said something earlier too that I think is so important that I've always I continuously have to tell people is it's not always going to be about finding common ground. We're not always going to come to some agreement, but at least if we get to a point where we're hearing each other. If I'm able to convey my message to you, you're able to convey your message to me, we can start working through it from there. But that starting point, that first block is the conversation, because if we're not listening, we could just as well be fighting. And a lot of time that's where it ends up leading.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, yeah, it does wind up there a lot of times. And if we can, what you've described was called active listening.
Mm-hmm.
And we learn how to do that sometimes when we're in relationships. So I learned it as a scholar when I interview people. But it's a practice that I wish that we would teach people more and more how to actually listen. And when someone just comes at you and you feel threatened, research has shown you literally cannot hear them. You really cannot hear what they have to say because you feel threatened. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so we have to find ways to communicate where people don't feel threatened, even though we have to be truthful and honest. I've been accused of being too nice to white people. I said, well, if I have to dehumanize white people in order to meet your criteria, well, then okay, guilty as charged.
Sure.
But I'm very honest. In my classes, we talk about institutional racism. We talk about, our history of racial abuse. We talk about privilege. I don't shield my white students from that, but I'm not going to do it in a way that's derogatory and dehumanizing to them. And in part, I try to be this in order to be a decent Christian, decent person, all that other stuff, but I also do it because it's more effective that way for people who do not already agree with you. It's much more effective to approach it that way. So yeah, I think that we're missing the boat. I'm hoping there'll be a growing group of people doing, this organization, Better Angels, that we can find, that we can be more of a voice in our society, because too much of our society is about the back and forth and polarization at this point in time.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I mean, like I said, that's one of the reasons that I do this, George, is because there is so much work to do, and we are. In a lot of ways, we are as divided as we could possibly be. In other ways, we're not nearly as divided as some would have you believe. I think we're a lot closer to finding better ways. But so much of this work that I've done has led me to the idea of I do want to make unity and civility cool again, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so many out there are using that fog model, that fear, outrage, and grievance model to keep us separated. They have that. There is a vested interest there. They are, for whatever reason, trying to keep us divided, trying to keep us scared, angry, and aggrieved. And I think it's just so much better to be part of this crew, to be part of what we're doing. It may not be as sexy to some people or as glamorous or whatever, certainly not as profitable, but what it is it's the right side of history. I like the fact that you talk about in your classes, George, you're not trying to shield anybody from anything. You're calling it just the way that you see it. You're calling it as you've experienced it and as you see the world, and that's what you teach, and that's why you teach it that way. I think that's the way that it needs to be, but you don't do it in a derogatory or demeaning way. I think that is so important, but to expose people to these different ideas, because far too many people, as we've been laying out in this conversation, and as people know that there's been, many of these kind of conversations on this podcast, far too often it's like, oh no, I'm not going to listen to that. I'm not going to be part of that. I'm not even going to entertain the idea of having that conversation because it's garbage, whatever. That's not right. We have to be able to sit there and listen to messages that make us uncomfortable. We have to be able to have conversations that very well in many circumstances could be a contentious topic, but it doesn't always have to happen in a contentious way. We've got to be able to work through our problems together. So I know we're getting towards the end of our time, George, but talk to me about, being a ProHuman Foundation member or Board of Advisors member. What are you hoping to bring with this pro-human message? I mean, this is one of the most important things that we can do with our time, and I think this organization put together by Daryl Davis, Brian, Bartney, and Letitia and Lori, the work that's going into this and the great things that can come out of it. Tell me what you're hoping to see out of this thing, George.
Well, I feel honored that I was asked to be on the board. I've been a admirer of Mr. Davis for a long time when I heard of his story. I think it's very inspirational, represents what I'm about, what I hope to do. What I don't always do well enough is to listen and work with people I disagree with. Bringing people like that from the brink of hatred into loving and caring for their fellow human being, regardless of race. What people consider the worst of the worst. I don't know all of exactly the direction of what the organization hopes to do. If I can be of service, I bring skills as a scholar, as a scientist that maybe one day will be needed. I would love to be able to be of service. I don't have any set ideas or visions in mind. I feel like I'm here to learn and follow, and then figure out how I can serve, because this is what I believe in. That's where I'm at this point in time. And so we'll see what happens as time goes on. You can be on board of directors and hardly do anything. You can do a lot, and I don't know how it's going to play itself out, but the vision that I've seen through the life of Mr. Davis is something that I definitely want to reinforce.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we are all unique individuals, and we all bring our own skill sets, and just for me, it's been a huge treat and a learning experience to get to know more of the advisors and be able to do this, use my platform, the Derate the Hate podcast, to shed more light on on the messages from my fellow advisors, and I'm so grateful for the time, George, that you've taken to have this conversation. I'm very grateful to know more about you and what you're doing, and certainly I want to make sure that people go out and check out the book Beyond Racial Division: A Unifying Alternative to Colorblindness and Anti-Racism. And I look forward to more collaboration. Thank you so much, George Yancey. It's been a pleasure having you here on the D-Rate the 8 podcast.
Thank you.
Friends, if there's anything in this episode that provided exceptional value to you, please make sure to hit that share button. Share it with your friends, share it far and wide. And of course, if you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe right from our website so you can get the D-Rate the Hate podcast sent to your email inbox every week. So this is Wilk wrapping up for the week, saying get out there, be kind to one another, be grateful for everything that you've got, and remember, it's up to you to make each and every day the day that you want it to be. If there is something that you would like to share with me, you can catch me on most social media platforms, or you can email me directly, wilk@wilksworld.com. With that, my friends, I am going to back on out of here, and we will catch you next week. Take care.